afternoon, everyone. This is Rochelle Seeger. I work at the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, and I'm thrilled that everyone has joined us here today on this webinar, Kentucky Inspired, Grieving in the Time of COVID-19. I work at the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, and the Foundation's mission is to address the unmet health needs of Kentuckians. The Foundation does that by developing influencing policy, improving access to care, reducing health risks and disparities, and promoting health equity. You can find much more about the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky at our website, healthy-ky.org. And on our website, you could also sign up via email to join our newsletter. The Foundation for Healthy Kentucky also has two health coalitions. The first one is the Coalition for a Smoke-Free Tomorrow. You can learn more about that effort and also learn about joining that at the coalition's website, smokefreetomorrow.org. And also the Foundation for Healthy Kentucky is leading a newly established health coalition serving the whole state, Kentucky's Coalition for Healthy Children, and that website is kentuckyhealthychildren.org. We welcome people to join these health coalitions who are interested in improving health for Kentuckians. The Foundation for Healthy Kentucky is a nonprofit founded in 2001, and we are led by a board of directors and also by a community advisory council. The Community Advisory Council is made up of Kentuckians from all across the state, and we are looking for more Kentuckians to join the council. You can read about the council and how to nominate yourself or others in your community on the Foundation's website, on the Learn More About the Council website. So, for example, we're looking for folks who are in these area development districts, including Buffalo Trace, Fiveco, Gateway, and Cumberland Valley. We also have some upcoming events I wanted to tell you about, including the Both Health Policy Forum, which is a series of webinars. And those webinars you can find on our website under the Events tab on the Both Health Policy Forum. After today's webinar, I will send you an email with a link to our post-event survey. So I would love to learn more about what you thought about today's webinar and give us feedback on future webinars and improvements we can make. This Foundation for Healthy Kentucky series that we call Health for a Change was started in 2011. And it really is to support the health of people just like you who are working to improve health across Kentuckians. Many health departments and health nonprofit advocates are here today, and many others. So I'm very glad that you're joining us here today. The archive of past Health for a Change events and the upcoming series is on our website under the events page, Health for a Change. This series is all about partnerships, and as you saw in the title, it's called Kentucky Inspired, because as COVID spread across our nation, I really wanted to take an opportunity to talk to Kentuckians who are doing fantastic work and do just as the title says, to inspire us to move forward during these very challenging times. Again, my name is Rochelle Seeger. Here's my contact information. Here, I welcome your emails, and again, the Foundation's website is healthy-ky.org. Just a reminder to everyone, we are recording today's webinar, so I'll make that recording available to you. You can share it with your friends. As we noted, we're talking about grief today, can be a very heavy topic, so if you need to take a break, stop the webinar, or move on with your day, please know that we'll have that recording available to you at a later time. Now I'm thrilled to turn it over to today's presenter, Karen Cassidy. Karen, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Rochelle. Hello, everybody. I'm Karen Cassidy. I'm the Executive Director of Hildegard House here in Louisville, Kentucky. Today our topic is grief in the time of COVID. This is a heavy and sometimes an emotional topic that might bring you down a little, so I've mixed this presentation with a little humor. Sometimes emotions can get triggered. So give yourself a few minutes after our time together to switch gears. This is the time of COVID. COVID now has its own marker in time, its own period of history. I'd like to start off today with a moment of silence to honor those we've lost during this time of COVID. May we always remember them, and may they rest in peace. Now we'll be watching a short video by the American Psychological Association.
The COVID-19 pandemic is not only a medical crisis, but a psychological one. Along with the collective anxiety, stress, and sadness comes collective loss and sorrow. Loss can shake our senses of self. Many of us will have to cope with the loss of loved ones in the midst of this pandemic. Many are also grieving their sense of safety, of social connection, of financial security. Losing a job, not having a graduation ceremony, not being able to attend a funeral, all are losses to be grieved. What we are experiencing now is a living loss, and as we move forward, people will continue to experience losses we can't yet predict. Psychologists say that in addition to grieving what is now missing from our lives, we may also grieve for the ways in which those losses affect our senses of self and personal identity. If part of who you are is defined by social interactions, what does it mean for you when you are quarantined at home? It helps to name and claim our grief. People often have a vague sense of anxiety or suffering, but putting words to those losses can help them identify ways to move forward. Psychologists recommend journaling to help with this process. Since most of us have never been through anything like this, it can help to explore how you got through another challenging transition, like a divorce or losing your job. How did you heal and recover through that process? You can likely apply some of those strategies to this situation. Social connections are still important. Psychologists encourage people to stay connected with their social support networks through phone calls, text messages, video chat, and social media. For many people, it will take time to recover from their losses. Keep checking in on friends and family members even after this period of isolation ends. Grief is natural, and most people are resilient. Though grief is difficult, it helps to recognize that it's natural and serves a purpose. Grief can help people turn inward and adjust to a new way of life without the people, places, or things they have lost. Research suggests that once a crisis has passed, most people are able to bounce back and move forward with their lives. Know that while grieving, it's normal to fluctuate between moments of sadness and mourning and moments of acceptance or even happiness. It's also important to remember that grief is temporary. The difficult feelings will pass. For more information on how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, visit APA's Pandemic Resource page.
There are some good takeaways from this video. One is about collective loss. The other is that we're really living this loss right now. If we get our sense of self and personal identity from social interactions, we may really be affected. We are social beings. No man is an island. We are all affected. We have a vague sense of suffering. We need to name it and claim it. That sense of suffering is grief. It's important to heal and recover. We've never been through something like this before. We're in a very historical time. We can expect to waver between sadness and happiness. Grief comes in waves. It hits when we least expect. Grief is natural and serves a purpose. There are different types of grief, almost 8 different kinds. There is anticipatory grief, sudden grief, disenfranchised grief, ambiguous grief, traumatic grief, post-traumatic grief, collective grief, and complicated grief. So let's take a look at each one of them and see how they act out in this time of COVID. Anticipatory grief can be described as the normal mourning that occurs when a patient and family is expecting a death. It's grieving someone who's still alive or that you're anticipating their death. Research indicates that caregivers of individuals with Alzheimer's disease frequently experience this type of grief. In COVID, we are all feeling anticipatory grief. That feeling we get when we know we're not certain what the future holds. Usually it centers around death. Now it centers on a virus. We feel it when someone gets diagnosed with COVID or when we have the normal thought that we'll lose a parent someday. With a virus, this is the kind of grief that is so confusing for people. Our primitive mind knows something bad is happening, but we can't see it. This breaks our sense of safety. We're feeling a loss of safety. We're grieving on a micro and macro level. Unhealthy anticipatory grief is anxiety. When we have anxiety, we see the worst scenarios. One particularly troubling aspect of this time of COVID pandemic is the open-endedness of it all. You have to remember this is a temporary state. It helps to say it to ourselves. This is temporary. History will show us that. This is survivable. We will survive. This is a time to overprotect ourselves and not overreact. Another type of grief is sudden grief. This is a kind of grief that happens when there's an emergency or a crisis, like a car accident or a heart attack, a stroke, or a natural disaster. During this time of COVID, we've experienced sudden grief with the loss of a job, or the loss of our freedoms during quarantine, the loss of the ability to travel, childcare, schools, family gatherings, holidays. Disenfranchised grief is a kind of grief that is not acknowledged by society. It's a hidden grief or sorrow. It goes invalidated by social norms. It might be minimized or not understood by other people. Examples of this are like breakups or estrangements with family members. You might lose someone permanently even if they're still alive. This can cause deep, lasting distress. With disenfranchised grief, there are no funerals or rituals. There's no validation for the loss or sorrow. The grief event feels discounted. This is a picture of my dogs, Desi and Lucy. Lucy, the little one on the right, died 3 weeks ago. An oblivious friend said, "It's not as though you lost a child." Obviously, she wasn't a pet owner. During the time of COVID, it's painful to have disenfranchised grief layered on anticipatory grief. Another type of grief is ambiguous grief. This is where there's a physical absence with a psychological presence, a loss that occurs without any closure or understanding of the loss. It leaves a person searching for answers and delays the process of grieving and often results in unresolved grief. Examples of ambiguous grief are infertility, termination of a pregnancy, disappearance of a family member, death of an ex-spouse, or a family member in prison. This is when the body of a loved one is no longer around, like an unrecovered body from war, but we remember them psychologically due to the chance of them coming back. Families of victims of the Holocaust often experience this, and it can also cause post-traumatic stress. During the time of COVID, often there's not a chance to say goodbye. Dying alone in a hospital or in isolation seems to be a common occurrence now, when people can't see or touch their loved ones. This is why Hildegard House was founded, so no one has to die alone or lonely. So it's so painful to hear of people dying alone these days. It's one of the griefs I experience as I hear of people dying alone. I want to tell the story of a friend of mine named Hilda. She's 96. She fell and broke her shoulder and was admitted into a rehab facility in April. She still hasn't been able to go home yet. Her son Jerry used to come and visit her outside her window. Last month, Jerry contracted COVID, was hospitalized and on a ventilator for 7 days. He died in the hospital alone. Every week when I talk with Hilda, she asks, "Did you know my son Jerry died? I didn't get to tell him goodbye." She begins to cry a little bit. He died all alone. This is the true grief of a mother, and she certainly is experiencing ambiguous grief. Traumatic grief is a grief that accompanies a loss that is unexpected. It's grief following a trauma. Pictures of the trauma continue to play out in your head. When someone experiences a traumatic death, their challenge becomes twofold. One, they have to cope with the trauma, and then they have to cope with their grief. This type of grief often happens when a death or event happens that is outside normal human experience. It's usually horrific to the person experiencing the loss. Suicides, murders, war, a shocking accident. During this time of COVID and Black Lives Matter, the newspapers and cable news are filled with stories of traumatic grief. There is not much happy news these days. There's no sports or celebrations, fundraisers, gatherings. Last Sunday, the New York Times had a story about a Japanese pianist who was gang-mugged on the subway. No one stopped to help him. He is recovering from the trauma of the physical injuries he received, but continues to replay this event in his head. He's unable to play the piano because of injuries. He is experiencing traumatic grief. Post-traumatic grief is experienced through traumatic memories that emerge for months and years after the traumatic event. Sometimes we call this PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. We think of this mostly with veterans, but it can also occur with any trauma, like sexual assault, or living through a natural disaster. In 2004, my son Ned was in the Peace Corps in Bangladesh. My daughter and son and I were going to see him at Christmas, and we were going to meet first in Bangkok. As we were in the Tokyo airport, my youngest son Joe noticed that there was some kind of weather event in Thailand where Ned had gone for a short vacation before meeting us. Ned was smack in the middle of the tsunami and was rescuing people, dead and alive. When he finally met us in Bangkok, all he had was his passport and flip-flops. I didn't understand why he wasn't overjoyed to see me, as I hadn't seen him in 2 whole years, and why he didn't want to go visit all the Buddhas with us the next day. The word tsunami was not even in our vocabulary yet. After watching the news and understanding what Ned had been through, I understand now that he was experiencing post-traumatic grief. In this time of COVID, we may see individuals with PTSD once this time of COVID is over. I especially think about our hospital heroes. Collective grief happens when a community or nation all experience extreme change or loss. There's a sense of powerlessness to prevent whatever's occurring. Just as going to the airport is forever different from how it was before 9/11, things will change, and after this time of COVID, there will be a marker for at which point they changed. This loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection, this is hitting us, and we're grieving. We're grieving collectively. We're not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. You can feel it. We need to talk about it together, or it becomes collective anxiety.
Karen, thanks so much for laying out all those different types of grief. In my head, I even see grief coming like in different outfits, the way you described it. I really appreciated that.
So,
I want to make one technical
Rochelle,
note. Yes.
I have one more. Complicated
very
grief.
Good.
Yes.
Complicated grief. It gets even more complicated.
Yes.
I'll let you continue on. I'd like to just remind participants that if they have questions or problems, they can chat in directly to me, and I'll do my best to answer any questions they have, either about the content or the technical side. Karen, back to complicated grief.
Thanks. Complicated grief is when painful emotions are so long-lasting and severe that you have trouble recovering from the loss and resuming your life again. Sometimes psychologists call this persistent complex bereavement disorder. This is when you have trouble carrying on your normal routines and you isolate from others, withdraw from social activities, experience depression or deep sadness, guilt, or self-blame. Complicated grief occurs more often in females and with people that are older. Symptoms include sleep disorders, anxiety, depression, increased risk of physical illnesses. Most grief is temporary and will run its course in waves. Complicated grief seems to last, and the best practice is to really seek professional help. This is a story about Keith Jarrett, 75, one of the most heralded pianists alive. He had a stroke in February 2018 and another in May 2018 and was paralyzed on his left side. He said, "I don't know what my future is supposed to be. I don't feel right now like I'm a pianist." He had such a strong relationship with his audience when he played, and he said he's unable to discuss losing that strong bond he feels with his public. When he sleeps, he dreams, and his dreams are, he is as messed up in his dreams, and then he wakes up and finds that it's just like real life. Poor Keith, I think, is experiencing complicated grief.
Thanks, Karen, for describing that for us. Lay out a little bit of what's coming next in terms of the stages of grief and what you'll be sharing with us on the next part of the webinar.
Sure. Just say that in terms of the grieving right now, it's a little different than other communal griefs that we've had. There's been no day of mourning like the one that we've had to commemorate, like victims of Hurricane Katrina, or memorial sites piled with flowers and photos like at Ground Zero. And this lack of recognition that we have, it's making it a lot more difficult to deal with. David Kessler, who was a colleague of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, said that one of his biggest fears is that we're going to have a wave of people with complicated grief because we're not allowing those grievers now to be forgotten. And this lack of collective mourning for COVID victims is rooted in the way that we're experiencing grief right now, and it's altered how we grieve. The virus, as it continues to spread, has kept our brains in survival mode. And it's a place where we're stressed and preoccupied rather than having an ability to be reflective and be present to the emotional experiences like grief. So now Rochelle, as you asked about these stages of grief, as you can see from the slide, there really are no stages of grief to work through. There's no defined endpoint, but there are. It's like scaffolding almost. There isn't a map, but it's like scaffolding if we can understand kind of some of the feelings that we have around grief. So there's denial, and with the COVID, what we usually say is, this virus won't affect me. And then often there's anger, and we say, you're making me stay home and taking away my activities. With bargaining, we say, well, if I social distance for 2 weeks, everything will be better, right? And then finally there's acceptance. And we say, this is happening. I have to figure out how to proceed through this. And acceptance, as you might imagine, is where we get our power. We find control in acceptance. We can say, I can wash my hands. I can keep a safe distance. I can learn to work virtually. And you can see through this slide that there is no timeline. It's different for everyone. And it depends on how we've mourned our past losses and grieved them. It depends on our life experiences and our beliefs about grief. Again, David Kessler believed that we should be adding a 6th stage to grief, and that one is called meaning. He said he didn't want to stop at acceptance when he experienced some personal grief. He wanted meaning in those darkest hours, and he believes that we find light in those times. He believes we will continue to find meaning now and when this time of COVID is over. So our old buddy Maslow, if we look at his theory, where are we now? We're at the very bottom of this triangle, down at psychological needs and safety needs. And most of us are at the safety needs, at safety and security. And others in our global world are seeking food, water and shelter, warmth and rest. Depending on where we are in the world, and if there is a natural event, like a California wildfire or Hurricane Zelda, or famine in Nigeria and South Sudan, 10 million people are experiencing famine, or even homelessness in Louisville. Many are just trying to meet their basic needs during this time of COVID. I want to introduce you to my friend Joy Berger, who is creative. She's a visionary, a music therapist, and a teacher. And she has made some incredible videos. She's a great resource for us all. I'd like to show right now a little snippet of one of the videos she made called Hope for Coping.
We bring to you hope for coping. There's so much more to grief than the overused stages of grief. Is acceptance a stage that marks the end? Researchers have discovered that grieving begins with accepting bits and pieces of the many realities of the loss. First, we accept realities that a loss is occurring. We mourn feelings. We adjust to life without the person or thing. We rebuild our lives. And we keep doing this again and again and again. Each time a new moment hits us that life has changed. Acceptance instead of a final stage we achieve. It's more of a change point marker for coping. Acceptance asks, what now? Coping with grief is less like these stages and much more like this tree. Relate this tree to you and your loss. What parts of you have been cut off, feel dismembered? What parts of you are still alive? Both loss and restoration are going on at the same time. This tree's healing doesn't occur as a stage. Seasons will come and go and circle around again through more storms and life stories. consider others journeying on, or perhaps stopping to rest and be with you for a while. In time, new growth can come, yet reminders of what was there will remain. Back to COVID. What day is it? Did you lose track? Life's often like this with grief. Grief versus mourning. Grief is about how the loss affects you. Mourning is more proactive. It's about what you do with your loss and grief. Do you treat your loss like dirt to throw away? Or do you choose to use your loss to plant seeds for new life ahead? The words mourning and mourning both have the same Latin root, mare, which means to die and to flicker. They refer to dim lights of illumination, darkness, twilight, and dawn. The word morning means the entire period from midnight to noon, from darkest night through dawn and into the fullness of day.
Karen, I love that video. I especially love the part about the calendar. What day is it? Because many people on this call with us here today know that I accidentally sent out the reminder to everyone on the wrong day. So that really resonated with me about being confused about what's happening and what day is it. Today's Thursday, and I'm glad everyone is joining us here today.
Me too.
Karen, some comments about, this is tough. This is a sad conversation. And, how do people engage in some different strategies to have these conversations? And I know we're going to cover that in just a moment. So next up, Karen, if you'd talk about what we've lost and really what are we experiencing at this time?
Sure. So I think it's helpful for us to be reflective about what have we lost and what type of grief are we experiencing. So maybe you could just take a minute and think about that for yourself. What have you lost? And what type of grief are you experiencing? Types of grief that we mentioned. I know for me, some of the things that I miss and that we've lost are the arts, the theater, sports events, going to movies, eating out. This is a picture of my dad with 3 great-grandchildren, 4, EJ, Max, Miriam, and Petra. Before COVID, he was able to hold them. Now the babies are walking and babbling, and he has another new great-granddaughter, Nora. And now he only sees his grandchildren through the front door. EJ's handing him some cookies through the door. No physical touch, no hugging like grandparents or great-grandparents used to be able to do. I think isolation is particularly difficult for the elderly. The elderly are experiencing the systematic losses of aging already, but the isolation of COVID is particularly difficult for them. And I grieve this for him too, those relationships. Due to COVID, Sweet Caroline is banned. There will be no touching hands or reaching out, touching you, touching me, until further notice. This is something that I grieve, and sometimes I wonder, will anyone ever shake hands again? Will we ever come back to our rituals of shaking hands or hugging those that are dear to us without flinching or wondering about our safety? Some of us are missing our job and our relationships that come with our jobs. It's very hard to do end-of-life care, doing social distancing. I look at this picture of me and Thelma at Hildegard House and see that we have no masks on. I wonder what it will be like to have close relationships with people at the end of life when we're both wearing masks. What it'll be like for people with hearing deficits and who can't see well. And I wonder if we'll draw masks on pictures like this, like people draw mustaches on other pictures. Weddings, funerals, birthdays, praying, and even Sunday services. Rituals that were important to us that are still important to us. Grieving, being able to have those rituals. How do you grieve someone without a funeral? Will there ever be parties again? And what are we going to do about Thanksgiving? Unfortunately, Thanksgiving is canceled at our house this year due to COVID. Sadly, our pet turkey passed away and we're holding a visitation. In lieu of flowers, please bring a salad or a side dish. Just a little humor.
Karen, I try to eat vegetarian, so I'm all about the Thanksgiving side dishes. But, a lot of people have commented, and this is heavy stuff. On the one hand, to think about, but then on the other hand, I'm sometimes in work meetings or Zoom meetings, and, no one even mentions the grieving that's happening and the sadness around us. So would you take us through some ideas and steps that we can stay healthy and work through our grief in a healthy way?
Sure. So what can we do? What can we do to stay healthy and talk about grief, bring comfort to others? The first thing to do is name and claim it, giving it a name, saying it out loud, listening to our feelings. Our gut feelings are like our guardian angels, and we need to listen to them. There's something powerful about naming this as grief. It helps us feel what's really inside of us. And I've heard people say sometimes, I'm going to tell my coworkers I'm having a tough time, or I cried last night. When you name it, you feel it, and it moves through you. Emotions need motion. It's important that we acknowledge what we're going through. I think one unfortunate byproduct of the whole self-help movement, we're the first generation to have that, is that we have feelings about feelings. We tell ourselves things like, I feel sad, but I shouldn't feel that. Other people have it worse. I think we can and we should stop at that first feeling and go for 5 minutes to really feel sad. The work is to feel our own sadness and fear and anger, and don't worry about what's happening to someone else. So to stay healthy, we need to name and claim our own grief. Fighting it doesn't help because our body's producing the feeling. If we allow the feelings to happen, they happen in an organic way, and it empowers us, and then we're not the victim. Some people say journaling helps, but I don't think Snoopy likes it. Dear 2020, first of all, I'd like to let you know I'm typing this with my middle finger. As Joy told us, grieving begins with acceptance and looking at all of your options. But it takes a little work to get to acceptance, and naming and claiming it will help us get there. It's important to look at all our options. Lockdown can only go 4 ways. You'll come out a monk, a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk. Choose wisely. Some healthy ways to grieve are to think of ways that you can be creative. Create a new ritual. Plant a COVID tree. Read poetry. Work a jigsaw puzzle. Hildegard says we are all co-creators with God. What can you create? Make a favorite meal. Plant some seeds and wait for them to grow. Write a letter to an old friend. Create some order out of a messy closet. What helps in grief is connection with others. In any way that's possible, try to connect with others. Find a way to make a connection. Get on FaceTime. Make a phone call. Send a note of, I miss you, or I'm thinking of you. Walk in the rain, dance, Zoom. Do something you always wanted to do. Tell someone you love them. There's two things in life that change you and you're never the same. Love and grief. Elizabeth Gilbert says, grief is a force of energy that cannot be controlled or predicted. Grief does not obey your plans or your wishes. Grief will do whatever it wants to you, whenever it wants. In that regard, grief has a lot in common with love. Seems like there's this new concept now called pandemic fatigue. For me, this is really just grief. Health psychologists at the University of Wisconsin say their patients are reporting higher levels of depression and anxiety and alcohol and drug dependency as the pandemic persists, and they offer these tips. Accept that life will continue to be difficult for a while. Look for activities old and new that continue to fulfill you. Practice mindfulness to help you recharge. Stick to the 20-20-20 rule, which is for every 20 minutes you're looking at a screen, look away from the screen and focus on a spot 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Avoid constant video calls and prolonged screen time. Mental breaks are crucial, so get up and walk for 2 minutes every hour to reverse the negative health effects from sitting too long. Make physical activity a priority. Limit how much social media you're exposed to and avoid consuming doomsday stories and posts. And I'll add, limit the amount of time you spend on 24-hour news channels.
Thanks, Karen. A good idea. That last one, you busted me. I do look and see what's on Twitter all the time, and Twitter can be good, but it's frequently all of the bad news. I didn't hear you mention yet the pandemic dogs. I saw my neighbor, a very young boy, has his new pandemic puppy dog. Her name's Nala, walking down the street yesterday. Karen, how about advice on talking with kids and helping children through this time?
Children feel this collective grief and community trauma, even if they can't put it into words. They know something's different. These little creatures of habit love routine, and their routine is off. They feel lost. I think we need to give them a space to talk about their loss in whatever words they use without discounting them, providing them a place to memorialize people that they may have lost. Give them a space to create drawings or color notes and cards. Find an isolated senior to send those to. Simply be present and listen. No advice. Listen with your heart and remember their feelings are real. I like this little illustration. And try to remember we're not all in the same COVID boat. For some people, it's sprinkling. This is just a little break. It's a breather. It's a pause in the normal. It's time to reconnect with family and slow down. Honestly, for them, it's kind of peaceful. For some, it's a storm. It's a bit scary. It's disruptive. It's enough to make you stay up and watch the news and worry. For others, it's a hurricane. It's tearing off the boards and pulling off the roots. It's washing them out to sea. It's dark and an unknown. It's life-changing. It's not wrong to be enjoying the sprinkles or enduring the storm, but I think it's important that we don't negate the difference. Rest and take care of yourself, but don't minimize the hurricane engulfing your neighbor. Laugh at a meme, but get on your knees for your friends. Get in someone else's storm. I think now's a good time to stock up on compassion. Everyone will have different levels of fear and grief, and it manifests in different ways. A friend got really snippy with me the other day, and I thought, that's not like her. That's how she's dealing with this. I'm seeing her fear and anxiety. So we all need to be patient and think about how someone usually is and what they might be going through at the moment, and not be fearful about their emotions and grief. How do we turn from fear towards love? First, we need to be willing. Then take 10 slow, deep breaths. Walk near trees. Snuggle your pets. Sit and lay down. And right now, place your hand on your heart and say, may I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. How do we turn from fear towards love? How do we help someone else turn from fear towards love? Especially if they've lost someone. And here's what they're asking for you to do. They want you to ask about that person who died. They know you're going to worry that you'll remind them of someone they lost, but they always remember. So they're saying, ask me about my person who died. I know you worry you'll remind me, but I always remember. When you ask, my heart feels cared for. You've turned fear into love. I think this is one of the gifts Hildegard House gives to the community. We help our community grieve. We provide a home and compassionate care to individuals at the end of life who have no home or loved ones to care for them so that they may die with dignity. When I tell people what we do at Hildegard House, their face changes when I say end of life. They begin to tell their story of who they lost. The important word is lost. Our culture is uncomfortable talking about death, and so many walk around with grief. It helps us to talk about people that we love and people that we've lost. I was recently over at Baptist East, and I saw this sign. Are you feeling stressed, depressed, anxious, or overwhelmed? And it was a reminder to me that our hospital heroes are experiencing grief and that there are resources for them. Every day they experience loss and anxiety with anticipatory grief, sudden grief, and collective grief. Many will have complicated grief if it's prolonged. And so a special blessing to these people, these hospital healthcare workers who experience grief every day. There are resources for us too. And if you're feeling complicated grief, it may be wise to seek professional help. A broken heart does not necessarily mean you have a mental disorder. Over a long period of time, it's easy to feel paralyzed and you might not be able to function. So professional help is crucial. Here is my wish for you. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May your heart be at peace. This is a reminder to take a little time for yourself. This topic can be emotion-provoking and may cause you to experience some anger or sadness or other feelings that may have been brought up. If you think you're experiencing complicated grief, please don't hesitate to call someone. Don't be alone. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to close with just a sweet poem written by Mick Boren. Today I woke feeling less than joyful as the sadness of the world took shape in my troubled mind. Today I woke feeling less than enough to face the long list of all I should do, as if it all depends on me. Today my worrisome thoughts and heavy heart felt overwhelmed and insufficient to the all of it, until the wonder of a child and wisdom of an old man snapped me out of my sorrowful ruminations, reminding me that today is a gift and a miracle and a once and forever chance to choose wonder over worry and gratitude over grumblings about too little and too much. Today, I can choose to live in enoughness and beauty and the enduring magic of what is here and available right now. Take care of yourself, be safe, and let's take care of each other. Thanks for being here right now.
Thank you so much, Karen. I enjoyed hearing all. It's a heavy topic, but I just want to take a moment to go back to this slide that you put in. When I saw the slide, I laughed out loud because this is definitely me. This is the stages of grief, and maybe you all can see me make my air quotes, where one side it looks like a smooth line, and my experience side is a wild, crazy line. Because again, for me, it's one time I'm mad and sad, and then I'm making jokes, and it's not a straight line process. So I really loved all the information that you shared with us today, the ideas and the tips, and this is a heavy topic. Again, I want to remind everyone who's here on our call today, we are all unique. There are resources here available to us, like the Hospice Health Grief Center, Bluegrass Care Navigators here in Kentucky has a grief care line, and of course our suicide prevention hotlines for youth and adults, and crisis text line. These are all available to all of us at all times. So we need to take care of ourselves, just exactly as you said here today. So again, thank you to all who were on the call today. Thank you to Karen Cassidy for sharing her experience with us today. Karen, I want to let you know there's comments coming in about the poem that you just read. Would you remind us the author?
Sure.
If you have that.
It's Minx, M-I-N-X, Boren, B-O-R-E-N.
Great, and I will follow up in the email to everyone so they can have that author's name. In the last moments of our call, I'd love to play this video. This is a video that talks more about the Hildegard House and what they do there.
I'm a nurse practitioner. I went back and started to do palliative care. Every day, it seemed like I would see someone at the end of life that didn't have somebody. They're alone, or they have difficulty paying their bills, they don't have any insurance, they don't have anybody to care for them. You can't stay in the hospital when there's no more treatment. We would have to give the person taxi money, and the homeless men and women would have to go back to the shelter. Older men and women, people whose children live far away or whose children won't take care of them, they can't access hospice services. Where am I going to go? What's going to happen to me? To die alone without anybody? Yeah. And a hospital is nowhere to die. Hildegard House is a home, and we provide care, compassionate care to individuals at the end of life who have no home or family so that they can die with dignity. We are in a former Ursuline convent, and we renovated that convent. It took us about a year. That's where our home is now. We accepted our first resident July 2016, and since that time we've had 52 people that have come to live at Hildegard House. I mean, some of them can't believe it when they come in the room and they'll say, I get to have this room all to myself.
If you're a hospice patient in our unit at the hospital, I don't have anything else to offer you. And that's the farthest from the truth. Yeah, I have no other medical treatment to cure your disease that I can offer you, but I still have a lot I can offer you, so to speak.
The Louisville community has been so good to us. We've had so many individual donors and corporations and foundations and others that have been generous to us. So it's another one of those miracles. We don't charge a fee. We don't bill insurance. We don't charge our residents or their families anything. The heart of Hildegard House is our volunteers. There are right now about 65 people that commit to serving a 5-hour shift once a week. They're called compassionate companions. They walk right along with someone on their journey.
It's very humbling to take care of people at end stage of life because they're vulnerable. It's an intimate time in their lives, and so we try to be very cognizant of that.
Having somebody care about the things that are important to you, your favorite food or your favorite song, no, those are really important human things that we give somebody at the end of their life, and it helps them be peaceful, gives them dignity.
This is their home, and so we make their journey the way they want it. And for them to allow us to be part of this journey with them, it's the greatest honor. There truly is.
It's hard to be around compassionate people and not be compassionate, and that's what we find, this one big compassionate community here.
We don't forget the people that we lose. They become part of us. He was a man that was exactly my age, and he was alone in the world. He had cancer that it had metastasized everywhere. And when he got here, he didn't want any pain medicine. And as volunteers, we kept offering, and he would quietly refuse it. It was a very hard death because of his desire for no medicine. But we got through it, and it was beautiful, magnificent. We did it together. And I found out later the reason he had refused all medication was he had been addicted to opioids, and he had beat the addiction, and he said, I want to die free. And he did.
You know, I didn't imagine that I would be starting a nonprofit. I didn't imagine that I'd be starting Hildegard House. But, you know, one of the things Hildegard said is, I'm a feather on the breath of God. And so that's kind of how I live my life. So that feather kind of floats around. And while I couldn't imagine that I would start Hildegard House, I'm not surprised.
Again, thanks to Karen Cassidy of Hildegard House. Thank you to everyone who joined us on this call. I will make the recording available to you very soon via email. An honor to be with you today. Thank you. Let us take care of ourselves and take care of each other. Rochelle Seeger, I'm honored to work here at the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. Have a nice afternoon. This concludes today's webinar.